Need adjusting for this one too, is it okay?
What?
Good, it's often better if you can't hear me. I do have to apologize to our guests today. I don't know where they messed up on the scheduling, but see, I'm not the speaker who's out of the box. I'm the speaker who has no clue where the box is. So,
That's better.
you're going to have to accept this as one of those strange experiences you have when you come up into the mountain. So we had, our theme this month is relationships, and I was really pleased with that because I thought, well, I have a whole bunch of stuff because my relations when I was young were just fascinating. I had an uncle who would pay me a quarter to let him cut my hair. I'm not sure where this came in the whole thing, whether my parents were doing it, but he would pay me a quarter because I didn't want to have my hair cut when I was little. He'd pay me a quarter to do it, and then he would say these weird little poems while he did it. One of them was, when you were born, your mother was there, your father wasn't there, we couldn't find him anywhere. I don't know where these things but the only kind of haircut he knew was that buzz cut sort of thing, and so I spent my whole childhood like that because not only did he cut my hair like that, but heck, for a quarter, I wanted him to cut it all the time. I had a cousin who periodically, I guess when he was just feeling wild, he'd go up on the roof and then he would go hand over hand across a telephone wire, across the street to the other side. So I was thinking of this and I thought, well, the problem is my whole family was like that. I could spend the whole time talking about that. And there probably wasn't anything spiritual in any of this. So I thought instead I would talk about the philosophy of relationships. See, in America, we're very much into the rugged individualists, aren't we? That's what makes America great. That's what we're built on, the rugged individualist, the loner. And I mean, who says that more than the mountain man or the gold prospector who would go out not relying on anybody else except himself, going into the mountains? And, when you think of that, not relying on anybody on their own, but of course they were typically carrying a gun that they didn't make, and pans and utensils that they didn't make, and probably saddles that they didn't make, and maybe wheat or oat flour that they didn't make. So they weren't all that alone. And they would go out and get pelts or get gold and come back in and sell it to other people. And those who spent long times out there generally spent part of those time with Native American tribes. And so the concept of this lone person is really not real at all. It's an illusion. And we get that because the primary purpose of our mind is to lie to us. That's what our mind's there for. It's to trick us into everyday life. And I want to give you an example of that. Let's take something here. Let's take our Positive Living Center sign. Now, what I want you to do is put that in your mind. Look at it, put it in your mind, and think of it as just separate. It's just a totally unique, separate thing itself floating there. Can you do that? Okay, your minds are tricking you. Just wanted to make sure you were into that. And I'm going to show you why. We've talked about this before. Let's take the chair that you're sitting on. Now we think of that as an individual thing, separate from everything else. And yet, if you took that chair and you could look at it in the most microscopic, subatomic view, what you would see is individual molecules, atoms, electrons moving around, actually moving out of the chair and back into it. When it's sitting on the floor, there is no actual separation. Electrons are moving back and forth between the floor and the chair. When you're sitting on it, the clothes you're sitting on are not totally separate. There's an energy exchange of electromagnetic energy, of heat energy that's flowing back and forth. And so the concept of that being separate isn't real. But let's take that one step further. To show this, I'm going to grant you a very magical power. I have the capability of doing this. So I'm going to give you this power, not just to visualize this sign on its own, but I'm going to grant you the power to magically take that sign and place it out into the furthest reaches of space, into an absolute vacuum. So it's not touching anything else. It doesn't have air around it. It has nothing. So you now, I have granted you that power. Take this sign, put it right out in the furthest reaches of space. Now, it has no light waves touching it. It has no gamma rays touching it. It has no air around it. It's totally separate. Have we made it a separate thing? No, absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. There's two things of that. First of all, it is made of molecules, atoms, protons, and those are made of forces. And some of those forces, some ways the electromagnetic force pulls some things together and it pushes other things apart. And the strong and weak force pull some things together, and yet the forces within the momentum of the electron, the vibrations of the protons are driving things apart. And so everything that exists is a perfect balance, a perfect relationship of the parts that it's made of. But even more than that, that sign is interacting. The molecules within that sign, the protons within that sign, are interacting constantly with the Higgs field. We've talked about that a little before. They've recently discovered the Higgs boson. The Higgs field is a field that permeates all of the universe. Everything. It's through us, it's in this chair, it's in the air, it's through absolute vacuum of space. Only it's different than other fields. It's different than the electromagnetic field because it has no energy, and yet it has tremendous energy because the Higgs field is virtually potential energy. The potential energy of the universe. And so what's called virtual particles are constantly being created out of nothing except the Higgs field. And every proton, every neutron, every electron in that sign must be interacting, must have a relationship with the Higgs field at all times, or they would cease to be molecules. They would cease to be matter, and they would turn into pure energy and go away. So in order to exist, for this to exist, for this chair to exist, for you to exist, you must be relating to the Higgs field at all times. And so the concept of something separate from everything else is an illusion. We aren't in a relationship. We are a relationship. That's what defines who we are, who everything is a relationship among all things, a relationship of the very foundation of the universe that defines the energy that permeates all things. Now, when I was thinking about that, I realized, that's not what we normally think of. And particularly when we're growing up, we don't start thinking, wow, what I am is I'm a relationship with everything. No, we're taught who we are. We're taught that, you are this and that person's that. And we're all giving labels, and that's what we're brought up with. And then as we get older, we start thinking for ourselves and thinking, well, no, that's not right. They don't define me. I'm this individual soul. And I have this own purpose that's separate from that. And then as we get older, a few of us can fit into that category of getting even older. Perhaps we get even a little bit wiser than that. Now this is where it gets weird. Because when I was preparing this talk, many of you heard my last one where we somewhat integrated my presentation with Stephen's music. And this time we're going a step further. This was brilliant. This was brilliant. We're going a step further. I'm writing this poem that was going to totally merge into his song. And then I learned that he wasn't presenting the music today. And so I thought, well, then I don't do the poem approach. Only Spirit didn't seem to agree with me. Spirit said, this is what I've given you to present. Stephen's not there for the music? Too bad. So what you are going to get is a poem that I've written about this process and about who we are. Wait. That's a limerick. That's something different.
That's next month.
Yeah, that's another theme for that one. We all know a simple truth of how life tends to be. When we're young, we think we know all we'll ever need. Then in middle age, we learn perhaps there's something more. We start to find a different way than we ever knew before. When we get old, we start to see what was hidden from our view. We get to know brand new truths about both me and you. So join me now, let's make that trip through youth to older age and maybe see where it might lead, perhaps to a spiritual sage. The years go on, the years go by, we change and learn and grow. Our lives are our relationships with everyone we know. When I was young, I thought I would know just who I was to be. I thought I'd find that special role that was meant just for me. I was told by all I knew, we each must play our part. We took a test that was supposed to say the dream that was in our heart. When I was young, I knew for sure we each must play a role that told us all just who we were and the places we must go. We were defined by the role we chose, the part we chose to play. Every person on every street was labeled just that way. When I was young, I could tell the good ones from the bad. Each person was the clothes they wore, the type of car they had. What we did and what we dreamed were determined by those roles. Some were meant to live in riches, some in ghetto roles. When I was young, each person was the label that they wore. Doctor, lawyer, teacher, thief, their job and nothing more. The role they played, mother or wife,